Alrighty, let's do this. Episode number 11. It's actually one of my lucky numbers. I want to talk about life and the fact that it's dynamic and not static. In fact, just this idea of dynamic equilibrium versus these static statistics that stupid people, particularly leftists, like to always point to when they talk about inequality or when they talk about what's wrong with the world. And they take a sliver of data from something that they've studied, and they say that's the way it is, and that's how it's always been. Instead of taking a moment to realize that all complex systems, all living systems, life by its very definition is something that moves. It's something that is dynamic. It changes. This is the definition of life. There are inequalities everywhere. There is compounding. There are power laws. There are self-reinforcing spirals. There are death spirals. Like, these are all normal aspects of living systems. And when they're allowed to operate, they find their own dynamic equilibrium without some arrogant bureaucrat trying to, fix something that is, naturally in its own operation. And one of the usual things that get pointed to is, the one percenters, those who are 1% wealthy. Now, we do have some problems at the moment in the system, and that's because we keep fucking with it, and we've endowed these institutions, with monopolies on morality, on ethics, on economics, and on violence, really. So, but by doing that, we create a system whereby you get a little bit of stasis and less dynamism or less movement in a living system. And when you do that, when you create some form of stasis somewhere where someone's able to moat themselves and maintain, call it power, wealth, or whatever, unfairly. And because these systems are holistic, economics is holistic. The anthroposphere, like human beings, us as a species on this planet, we're holistic. So, generally, if someone's getting an unfair advantage, not generally. If one group is getting an unfair advantage, it is at the expense of somebody else. Unfair. Big difference there between fairness and equality. Now, let's talk about wealth. So, in a normal, even in this system, which is totally skewed and fucked up, life's natural dynamics, life's natural movement, the aliveness of human beings necessitates that things move up and down. So, when you talk about the 1% who are wealthy, they aren't the same fucking 1% who are wealthy a generation or two ago. Over time, as is normal with human beings, is you trade your youth for, some level of wealth. You spend your life working, you trade that time and energy, that stuff that you cannot get back. And if you've got half a brain, you will have saved some. You will have built up some assets. You will have built up some wealth. And over time, guess what? You will become part of the 1%. Most of the people screaming about the inequality in wealth are young people who've been around for 20 or 25 years, who've studied a little bit of uni, who've looked at the 1%, realized that they're old people, and in many cases, they're white people. So of course we've got this evil white person patriarchy that is somehow corrupt and taken advantage of everyone. Now, I don't want to discount the fact here that there is, a real Cantillon effect. But even with the Cantillon effect, we have this dynamic equilibrium. You have, Apple and IBM is a great example I like to use often, is that IBM's a 100-year-old company practically. or maybe not that old, but they're much older than Apple. And Apple is how many times their size now? 4, 5, 6, 10 times their size maybe. Probably not 10, I'd guess about 5. And Apple's maybe a fifth of their age. And it was started out of a fucking garage, with a refugee who was an orphan. Like, it's you cannot tell me that any of these things are fixed. Big corporates as well. Like, I mean, this is seeing Apple overtake someone like IBM and seeing new startups come up, and through innovation, through nimbleness, through product market fit, through whatever mechanism, through adding extra value to the marketplace, or being at the front of a trend, or creating a new trend. These are the things that allow life and allow society to progress, and allow it to be dynamic without us having to screw with it. So, in life, I believe the more freedom you give to life, the more opportunity you create. Now, the more you restrict freedom, and this is an important point, the more you destroy the opportunity to create opportunity. So I believe freedom and opportunity are inextricably linked. So, I've spoken before, I think in an earlier episode, and I will talk about, equality of outcome and equality of opportunity down the track. But, we talk about equality of opportunity as obviously the better one than equality of outcome, because equality of outcome is, obviously complete fucking madness. You don't really have to have any brain, or you only need a fraction of a brain to realize how bad equality of outcome is as a aspiration, right? But equality of opportunity, particularly in the early days, I thought this was, a very noble thing. But it's practically impossible, unless we wipe the slate clean somehow, blow the world up, and start everybody from the same base. Like it's not functional. Now, you understand, some people say, well, look, we're talking about equality of rights, like we should all have the same rights. Well, I'll do another video about why I believe there's only really one right that we need to, build off, and that's the right to choose, the freedom to choose. And that right cannot take away somebody else's right or freedom to choose. And when you structure society like that, that's a right that bears within it the notion of private property rights, you being your first and most important piece of property. Now I'll discuss that later, but equality of opportunity as a notion is arguably an impossible outcome. But if you optimize society for freedom and for liberty and for the right to choose, and you remove the institutionalized collectivism that gets in the way of personal agency and individual responsibility, what you actually do is you foster opportunity in society, and you actually increase the quantity of opportunity. And as a result, because you've increased the quantity of opportunity, you actually increase the availability of it. And I believe in that sense, you actually get the outcome of more opportunity. So I think what we are looking for is not equality of opportunity even, it's a abundance of opportunity. And that's a derivative of a freer, more liberal, I shouldn't even say liberal because they've co-opted that word, libertarian society. So it's an interesting thing. So I'll say it one more time. The more freedom you give to life, the more opportunity you create. The more you restrict freedom for equality, the more you destroy the opportunity to create opportunity. And this is where I believe, one of the fallacies of the collectivist lies, is they're out there to flatten everything from, corona curves to people's ambitions to people's ability to, be incentivized to do great things. They want to flatten everything because we're all apparently the same. We're not allowed to have differences, and at the same time, they have these contradictory claims that we need diversity. But they want to pop everyone into the same box and mash us together and assimilate and integrate and all this sort of stuff. So that way, there is no longer any diversity. It's the logical inconsistencies, of the collectivists drives me mental. So if we're talking about, freedom, like, it's very important to come up with a set of rules. Now, again, without getting too philosophical here, I'll touch on a few points that I've written here. Is a focus on the individual and a fixed set of rules, unable to be changed by any individual or a specific subset of individuals, gives rise to a society in which the best of us is rewarded. And you get these network effects of people within their communities being incentivized to be better. Now, you're not going to eliminate bad behavior, but by incentivizing good, productive behavior and disincentivizing the ability to win at the expense of somebody else, you start to structure society in a more functional manner. But it needs to come from some base principles around freedom and private property, and it needs to come from a place where no institution or no group of people is given a moral, ethical, economic, or monopoly on violence. Like the more you create monopolies, the more you create distortions in society that then manifest as unfair inequalities. I don't think anyone really cares about fair inequalities. We all celebrate sports stars. We all, love, the musicians who are the best in the world, artists who are the best in the world, actors, scientists, entrepreneurs, like all this stuff. We all strive to be, to either be inspired by the greats or to be the greats in some way, shape or form. And that's what drives humanity forward, reaching for the stars, reaching for what's best in us. And if you cap that, you start to kill the spirit of humanity. But this is where something like Bitcoin is obviously so important. And as a corollary, the Constitution was quite important in America. It was these set of rules that everyone chose to abide by that were quite broad and within them instituted concepts such as the freedom to speak, the right to protect yourself, the right to bear arms, the right to come together in groups and protest. Like all those specific rights were really fundamental for building a level playing field. And Bitcoin and its white paper and the rules that it represents is very similar in that sense, is that it's a level playing field. It's a set of rules that are far, far, far like more robust and voluntary and opt-in and have the notion of private property rights built into it, on an economic network that is infallible. So it's got all of these things, and from there, individuals can make choices. They can form groups. They can form groups along, values, along ethics, along, desires, things that they want, etc., etc. And you start to create this society that is freer, more liberal, and far more abundant in opportunity. And what do you have there? You have beautiful inequalities that are dynamic. I'll talk, like I said in the last episode, I'll talk further about, monopolies being impossible in free markets. But this is what you get. You start to get a situation where the only moat that you can build is consistent innovation. But just like we have, generations, grow and age. We just started reading The Fourth Turning, which is okay so far. they talk about how, each generation is different to the prior generation, grows up with a different set of values. Like those changes in values, those evolutions in what's important to each generation, those changes are always going to exist. That's part of the dynamism of life. And as those change, in a free market economy, in a free market society, with private property rights, as the core principle, you have something where each generation can build something of value for themselves, and things change. You can't concentrate as much power as you can in a corrupt system where, a few people have the monopoly on violence, economics, ethics, and morality. So, coming back to some of my notes here, focus on the individual and a fixed set of rules unable to be changed by an individual or a particular subset of individuals, like a party, gives rise to a society in which the best of us is rewarded, and people move up and down the scale of haves and have-nots. And I think I spoke about this in a prior video, where I discussed hunger. Is some of the benefits that you get from being at the bottom, from being a have-not, is you learn fucking grit. You learn what it takes to have thick skin, to have to get out there and work your fucking ass off. Like I grew up like that. I wasn't given shit on a silver platter. I had to work my ass off. My dad, very similar as well. And that instilled in me a bunch of work ethic. This is another one of those dynamic things. It's like, imagine being born where everything was given to you, where you're sheltered, where you haven't felt lack or loss or any of those sorts of things. And then when you come and interact with other human beings in the world, you haven't built the callus, you haven't built the thick skin for that. And you either learn fast or you lose. And it's the classic Rocky 3, with Rocky and Mr. T, right? Rocky had come up from nothing, from some bum in Philadelphia, working at a slaughterhouse, an abattoir, and punching the ribs of dead carcasses, to beating Apollo Creed in the second one, and then in the third one they show him having reached that pinnacle, knocking everybody out along the way, and then a new contender comes in, someone who's got nothing, who's come from the bottom, who's fucking hungry, and what does he do? He beats the shit out of Rocky because he was more hungry. And Mickey was dying and all this sort of stuff, but he still would have beat the crap out of Rocky because he was there to fucking win. He was hungry, came from the bottom. And this dynamic equilibrium is such an important thing. So Rocky had to go and dig deep again. He had to go back to his roots and do that. And that's the journey of, it's the hero's journey. It's part of growing up. It's part of building all of the layers of yourself as a human being. And if we remove these things by trying to baby and cushion society, we start to kill the strength of the individual, and we start to make society retarded. So a couple other notes I've got here. So some start at the bottom, whilst others start at the top. Those at the bottom rise because they grow up learning the value of hard work and perseverance, while those at the top, who had it easy, they learn complacency. Which is exactly what I discussed in the Rocky 3. So I'll conclude here because I've gone long enough again. I'm still trying to do a 10-minute video. I don't think I'll ever do this. Dynamic equilibrium is found in all living systems. And all living systems, operate upon a set of fixed rules that, can't be changed or manipulated. And then you allow these rules to operate these organisms to operate freely. And, some parts of the organism make good choices, some don't, and this is part of that, balancing and navigating, and, whether in a business context, finding product market fit, whether in evolutionary context, survival of the fittest, and fittest doesn't just mean strongest, like wake up here, or, in whatever else, as a human being, navigating values and learning how to live a good life. You don't figure that out when you're young. You make mistakes and you hone that path along the way, and that's extremely important. Life is a constant flux. There is no fixed balance, like I've written here. The notion of fixed equality or balance, this idea of stasis, we know what that is. It's called death. It's called non-living. Stasis doesn't exist. That's the it's the end of the universe. It's the finish. It's gone, done. Like, life is this mobile, dynamic thing, and the more we try and fix it, even the terminology of fixing it is fucking mad. So, life is alive. It's dynamic. It's unpredictable by its very nature. And the more you can predict it, the less alive it is. So this is again another fallacy of the collectivists. So, I'll finish here. Like Bruce Lee said, be like water. A flowing river is alive. Static water goes rancid. Remember how important it is to remain dynamic, and for society to remain dynamic, and for society to be free enough to be dynamic. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you at the next episode. Oh, and P.S. obviously, share, like, subscribe, yada yada yada. I hope people are learning from these things. I think this information is valuable, and I hope it inspires further discourse. So yeah, I'll see you at the next episode. Thanks again for listening.